Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you all are doing well and staying safe during this uncertain time. Just to start off, I thought I'd introduce myself. My name is Riya Shanavas and I'm from Canton, Michigan. First, I would like to sincerely thank everyone who organized this at NANMMA. This is a wonderful platform for youth to really develop their voice, so I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. So today I will be giving a reflection on a lecture from Sister Yasmin Mogahed on staying spiritually afloat. So before I started my research, I had some assumptions about her. I had heard a lot of her work, specifically her book Reclaim Your Heart, and I hadn't heard much, or I didn't know what it was about, but everyone said the same thing. It really speaks to your soul. So, those are kind of high expectations, but I wanted to talk about something that really speaks to me. So, when I was doing my quick YouTube search, I saw staying spiritually afloat, and that resonated with me for some reason. But I thought about, what does staying afloat mean to me? And so, when you talk about staying afloat, that means you're at risk of going under. So, as a Malayali Muslim woman who grew up in North America, I can tell you you're always at risk of going under. And I don't mean this to instill fear or in a fear mongering way, but that's essentially one of the problems or issues that are facing our ummah today: fear. And so this really resonates with me because there's this fear of loss, right? And this fear of loss in our community. Specifically, as a Malayali Muslim, my parents came here and, for a better life, but there's this fear of this loss of our culture, this loss of our faith, this loss of our value. And so before I really get into that, I wanted to give a general breakdown of what Sister Yasmin had talked about in her lecture. So she starts with this really striking and relevant metaphor, and mentions how this patient comes in. Patient comes in with an infection, and they have one choice. You have an antibiotic or a painkiller. So this pain is really getting to the patient, and naturally they choose the painkiller. So that's great, the pain is gone, but the root of the issue, the infection, is still there. And that's very similar to the state of our community. The root of our problems are still here. So our society has turned to putting these band-aids on bullet wounds and hoping that something magically happens, and that's just an unfair expectation for us to have. So instead of examining the root of these problems, we're really turning to fear, right? And so with this fear that I had mentioned, this loss of our culture and this loss of our faith, my generation specifically is feeling, I can only speak to my experience, but I can assume that we are feeling this great sense of responsibility and even pressure to prevent this loss from happening. And some people react to this pressure in different ways. Some people rise to the set standards that are present, and some crumble on, of course they would crumble under that much pressure. So for me specifically, I have definitely had my fair share of feeling very motivated. I want to be my best self, but I've also, really struggled with doubt and how can I live up to the standard of being the perfect Muslim, of being the perfect Malayali, or being the best woman that I can be. These are all great pressures that we are facing. So with this pressure, I think of doubt, and doubt starts to creep in. And these are just one of the spiritual diseases that Sister Yasmin had talked about in her lecture. So when Sister Yasmin talks about sickness, she talks about sickness in a way that it's caused by one of two things. One, the deprivation of our needs, our essential body needs, and two, disease, right? So as a Muslim, what are our needs? Um, when we grow up, we are taught to perform salah, to remember Allah in our everyday life, to make dua, to give zakat, and there's so many things, right? And it's when these things become a burden or a hindrance to our everyday busy lives that our hearts begin to become deprived. So growing up, I had heard these things like, you got to do all these things. But, in the back of my head, I'm like, what does missing one salah really do? What is the world going to come falling down? Like, I don't think Allah is depending on my prayer. And these are just some of the things that I had in my naive mind. But it's really when I went to college that I realized that I am really dependent on Allah. And it's honestly with every step that I take, every decision I make, and that can be really overwhelming, but it's the truth, or it's what I've come to know is the truth. So, in addition of depriving our body of our spiritual needs, something that can also lead to sickness is disease, right? So, Sister Yasmin highlights 5 spiritual diseases that affect our hearts. She talks about the love for this life slash dunya. She talks about envy. She talks about doubt, which I had mentioned briefly. She talks about the loss of good character. And finally, she talks about despair. So I'll be talking about each of these points. First, the love for this dunya. So living in our capitalistic society, it's hard not to strive. We're conditioned to want more. We're always working hard. If we want something, we work hard for it, and we're trying to live the American dream. But with striving comes the desire for power, wealth, and status, right? And it comes with this assumption that what we have is not enough, right? So Sister Yasmin highlights that at various stages of our life, we want different things. So growing up as a little girl, we want the latest toy or the latest Barbie. But then when we get a little bit older, around 6 or 7, we're always bored. We're always in need of entertainment, right? And then we go to high school, and it's about how we look or who we are, right? And this seeps into young adulthood, and it becomes about this comparison of who's getting to these certain milestones, such as academics or wealth, or who's getting married at the right age. We're all competing with each other, and then this comparison passes on to our children. So this toxic comparison culture has only been magnified by social media. So I have definitely fallen victim to this, like many of my peers, when it comes to Instagram, Snapchat, and for some TikTok. It's really about who has the most likes, who has the most followers. We've even reached a point where we glorify how our food looks. I don't know the last time that we've just had something to eat without telling someone or showing someone 200 miles away, which is probably crazy for our ancestors to think about. But, with all of this, it creates this attachment, and it creates this attachment to this life that we're having. We're chasing this life, and we're conditioned to want more, right? And so, what is this cure for this spiritual disease, right? We have to shift our focus, and that comes with shifting our focus to realizing that this life isn't it, right? There's a lot that we don't know, but one thing we do know is that at one time, or at one point, our time in this life will be over. And so we must ask ourselves, truly and honestly, have I done the most or the best that I can to set myself up for success in the hereafter? Now, the second spiritual disease is intimately connected with the first one, and this one is called envy. So, with comparison and attachment to this life, inevitably there is jealousy, right? So, as we always say, the grass is greener on the other side, right? Now, what we don't recognize is that there is so much unseen when we compare ourselves to someone else. So, someone's life may appear perfect on the outside, but we truly never know the struggles or battles that someone is facing on the inside. So with tunnel vision, it's easy to get caught up on what you see from the outside, right? So for example, she's clearly prettier than me. Look at all the likes and comments that she's getting. Or he's clearly smarter than me because look at all the opportunities that's coming his way, right? And so just like how we understand the world, we are putting people in boxes to understand them. And for some, they place these boxes in a hierarchy as well. Now, while I don't want to regurgitate too much of what Sister Yasmin said in her talk, I will leave you with this, and that is the cure for envy is gratitude. So, through my various experiences with volunteering or doing what I can with those less privileged, as I'm sure many of you have, something that was really striking to me is that it's usually those with the least that have the most gratitude, you know? And it's really important for us to recognize that with our privilege, our physical and mental abilities, and even me being able to be here today to talk, I can't help but be grateful for so many of the things that Allah has blessed me with today. The third spiritual disease that is affecting our ummah is doubt. Now, doubt can come from a variety of places. Doubt can come from anxiety of the future. Will I be successful? Do I have the ability to do X, Y, Z? Doubt can also come from insecurity, right? Now, how can I be forgiven? I have sinned so much. And doubt can also come from feeling lost. I don't know what to do. My head and my heart are in two different places. So when Sister Yasmin talks about doubt, she talks about doubt as a symptom of our sins. Now, we think of doubt as something that exists in our mind, and that's really understandable because we think of the thoughts that go through our head, right? But by solely talking to the mind and neglecting the heart, we're doing a great disservice, right? So sometimes, I don't know how to best explain this, but sometimes we twist this narrative in our head. You know, we're in a certain social situation with someone else, and we twist the narrative to fit what helps our ego. And because it's very hard for us to see ourselves as the villain in our own story, you know? So, you know, you might have experience with this, but oh, I didn't do any bad. Allah just meant for it to happen this way. And this is a great injustice to ourselves because we're not able to recognize our faults or our sins, you know? And part of that stems from this core belief that we can't overcome that. And that belief is challenged because of Allah's mercy, right? We constantly hear this over and over again. God is the most merciful. And I always wondered that. I was like, why is that always so repeated? But it makes sense now because Allah created us, right? He created us and He knew that we were imperfect. So we have to take the steps to recognize that for ourselves as well. Now, the fourth spiritual disease is the loss of good character. Sister Yasmin encompasses good character as being honest, being merciful, compassionate, and empathetic. So these are all great qualities that we're striving for, but she mentioned something profound though. So in today's political climate, we are calling out corruption in our leadership, left and right. But what she mentions is that corruption in our leadership is a reflection of corruption in the people. So she mentions how indeed Allah can only change the condition of the people if people are willing to change within themselves. So she also brings up a great point, which was how there's this common acknowledgement that those who are more religious become more harsh, you know, and I held that bias for a majority of my life. So growing up, I didn't have the most welcoming experience with Islamic school. I am very grateful for the foundation that was set up with my teachers and the Muslim community. I can never take away from that. But I have to be honest and say that it was tough at times because this superiority of race and superiority of knowledge was at the forefront at such a young age. Like, even on the playground, those are some of my memories of Islamic school. And that isn't, this superiority isn't something that is intrinsic in Islam. It's something that is learned, and it is something that is set in stone in childhood and kind of takes place through microaggressions throughout someone's lifetime. So for me, the best way to shelter myself from, being hurt was to distance. And with that isolation, I know that I've probably missed out on so much of the great things that community has to offer. So, especially for Muslim youth in America, there needs to be a safe space for us to feel not alone, to not feel strange, and to not feel foreign. So, the importance of these spaces became especially relevant during my time in college. In high school, there was this large student body. So, in fact, there were 3 high schools, and they were all on one campus. We all went to class with different people. So it wasn't hard to find people who looked like me or who shared the same faith as me. But when I went to college, I went to a Jesuit Catholic institution, and for some reason, I didn't really think much of it or of the change that would happen. But suddenly, I was in an environment where there was essentially no one that looked like me, or no one who had the same faith as me. I think I was the only Muslim living on campus at the time. So as you can see, like, that might have been difficult. And it was weird because I thought, oh, I'm going to feel so left out, or I'm going to feel so isolated or called out. But it was very strange because that community was so welcoming, and it was very profound for me because that's where I learned that there's so much more in common among us than we realize. And so I'm very grateful, by the grace of Allah, that I was able to have a good experience in my college by connecting on those similarities. But that's not to say that we shouldn't create those spaces. So I was very fortunate to have some fellow Malayali friends who were on my campus, and we started an association for South Asians to feel represented on our campus, and I hope that continues well past my time there. But that's just a little bit about the importance of creating those safe spaces. As the fifth and final spiritual disease that Sister Yasmin speaks to, she talks about despair, so this loss of hope. Now, faith undoubtedly fluctuates throughout someone's lifetime. It has definitely gone up and down in my lifetime, and I'm sure it has gone the same way for you. But just like the first spiritual disease, which was attachment to this dunya, we have to keep the big picture in mind, right? And so this life is a test from Allah. And just like the people before us have faced challenges and adversities, we are undoubtedly going to have our challenges. So while the challenges that Malayali Muslim youth in America face, that's so unique, those challenges don't go unnoticed. The struggles that people are facing in my generation and the generation above, those are not unseen by Allah. He's always listening. And so it's easier said than done, but even one step towards the straight path can help you so much immensely in ways that you don't even know. And I just want to end with a little note. All I ask is that our community is able to grant the grace and mercy that our Creator, He grants us so gracefully to us every day, and it would be beautiful for us to grant that to each other as we move forward, inshallah. Thank you so much for your time.